right, so we got a lot of stuff going on. There's a big week that we're headed into. Before we jump into any of that right now, though, let's take a minute. We have lots of folks that are watching online. So we've got a camera back here. So let's say hello to our online community. Hey, everybody! Glad that you are here with us. We have some special guests here today from Pennsylvania who normally watch every week in Pennsylvania, and they're here this week. So I always love when folks get a chance to do that. They walked in, I'd never met them before, and they're like, hey, we know you. I was like, yeah, I like that. That's awesome. So today is Palm Sunday, as John talked about in the announcement time. Today is the day that we do remember as Jesus was heading towards the cross. He headed into Jerusalem, and this was the time that the whole city was so excited. Jesus had a lot of fame at this point, and folks were ready for him to come, but they treated him like he was like a conquering king, that he was going to come and kick out the Romans. And so one of the things that they do in that culture to welcome those who are coming back from war or something like that is they just line the streets with palm branches, and they wave palm branches. And so there was a big celebration. Everyone was so excited about getting a chance to see Jesus. But as we go through this week, of course, as you read through Scripture, you know that the temperature of everything changed, and it went from the hallelujahs and hosannas of Palm Sunday to the crucify hymns of Good Friday. So I want to encourage you as we go through this week, take some time and maybe read through the gospel story about what happened in this week. And I really encourage you, if you're able to be here for our Good Friday service on Friday night, it's always a very memorable, moving time. It's at 6:30 right here in the worship center, and so I encourage you to come out for that. And then, like John mentioned, we've got all our Easter services, our Easter egg hunt, all kind of fun stuff like that. And also, don't forget that Easter Sunday is Baptism Sunday. So if you have either not been baptized before and you want to be baptized on Easter Sunday, I mean, wow, what a great what a great time to do it. Great imagery with Jesus raising from the grave to get a chance to descend into the water and come back out, or we can do it by sprinkling, either way. If you'd like to sign up for that, you can do so out in the lobby at the Connection Center as well. I know there's a lot going on. Two more things real quick. First of all, we have an events team now that helps coordinate some things, because as we're growing, we want to be sure to stay connected to each other and get to know people. And so we have an events team that's kind of planning some just kind of neat stuff that we can do together. So coming up on May 11th, there's a Matthew West concert at the Charlotte Event Center. So if you'd like to go to the Matthew West concert, you can sign up. They're getting some group tickets, so you can sign up for that out in the lobby as well. And then one last thing, one of the things I mentioned a little bit last week is just the servant heart of here at Edgewater. Again, that's one of our 6 marks of a disciple, is service. And we had some disciples show up on Friday. We had 16 volunteers come, and they put out 280 bags of mulch out in the islands out there. And they trimmed it up and did all kinds of things just to get us ready for Easter. So we're very thankful for all those folks who put so much time, effort, and energy in there. All right, I didn't know how many pictures they had, so I can still stall. Yeah, look at all that mulch. Yeah, no. All right, so always thankful for folks who are willing to do that. All right, well, today we are continuing our series that we've been doing through Lent called Signs. And throughout this series, we've been looking at the signs or the miracles that Jesus performed that we read about in the Gospel of John specifically. We looked at Jesus turning the water into wine, Jesus healing the official's son, the healing of the man on the Sabbath by the pool of Bethesda, the feeding of the 5,000, and last week we talked about Jesus walking on the water. So if you missed any of those, I encourage you can get online. We have them archived there on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our regular website. You can get to it all from there. So be sure to catch up. So today, as we get closer to Easter, here we are just 1 week away, we're moving along through John's account of Jesus' life. And so as we pick up the story, Jesus and his disciples were heading out from Jerusalem after the Feast of the Tabernacles. The Feast of the Tabernacles was one of those 3 yearly feasts that everyone kind of made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And so they came in, celebrated that feast, and then they were heading out. And as they were leaving the city, they came across a man who had been blind from birth. So let's pick up the story in John chapter 9, starting in verse 1, where it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? So let's take a look at that crucial question. That crucial question. The disciples turned to Jesus, and in the midst of this man's difficult situation, they asked the why question. Why is he like this? Why did this happen? And again, we're all tempted to ask that question from time to time. There's nothing wrong with that. Why has this happened? And in this case, they're asking, well, why is this man blind? What's the reason for his blindness? And when they asked the question, they only provided two possible options. They said, was it his fault or was it his parents' fault? Now, this all came to them kind of naturally because there was a common teaching in those days of the rabbis in that culture that said there is no death without sin and there is no suffering without inequity. So the question as far as the disciples were concerned wasn't if sin caused the blindness, but whose sin caused the blindness. Because it must have been somebody's, because the disabilities and stuff like that, they believed that it originated from someone's sin. So either the man had sinned or the parents had sinned. But here's the thing. The man had been blind for his whole life. So how could he have sinned? Well, there were some Jewish folks that believed in the pre-existence of the soul, which is the belief that all souls existed in the Garden of Eden before the creation of the world. So maybe somehow his soul had sinned before he was born, and then it manifested itself in his blindness. But more than likely, it then must have been his parents. His parents must have done something that caused this to happen. And this comes from a misunderstanding of Exodus in the Old Testament, Exodus 34:7, that says the sins of the father will be extended to the third and fourth generations. That is that sin so deeply corrupts our relationships that several generations of a family will be affected by serious sin. And while that is true to some degree, there are some kind of generational sins that kind of happen. It doesn't show up like this. It's not like, oh, Dan drank too much Mountain Dew, now his son is blind. Okay, it doesn't work that way. It's not those kinds of consequences. But let's see what Jesus' response was to this question that they'd kind of been sort of misinformed, and see what Jesus had to say. In John chapter 9, verse 3, he says, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. Jesus answered, this happened so the power of God could be seen in him. So Jesus' response points to a better question. Instead of getting stuck on the why, like so many of us get stuck on the why am I having to go through this? Why is this happening to me? Why is this going on in the life of my kids? Whatever. Maybe we should ask, what does God want to accomplish in this? What does God want to accomplish in this? So it wasn't the sin of the man or his parents that caused the blindness, but instead it was so that the power of God could be revealed in him. Now, I'm certainly not saying that the man or his parents were sinless. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that their sin was not the cause of his blindness. Something else to clarify in all of this is that Jesus is not saying that this man had to go through his entire life being blind all the way to this point just so God could show his power in that moment. Like God knew that he was going to do this at this point and said, okay, well, let's just keep this guy blind for his whole entire life. That's not what Jesus is saying also. I just got to tell you, I believe that there are natural things that happen in life. God created the world. He created everything, and he put natural laws in motion. Like if I were to just walk here not paying much attention and were to fall off and break my arm, I can't say, oh, well, God caused that to happen. No, God created the law of gravity, and my weight and everything carried me down to the floor, and I broke. That happened, but it wasn't God that did it, but God can do something through it. So I'm not saying that God caused your cancer. I'm not saying that God caused Shaney's MS. I'm not saying that God caused my baldness, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying any of that, but how can God use that situation? How can God use the heartache and the tragedy and the struggles? How can God use that to make a difference. His word says that God makes all things work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. All things, even the hurts, even the heartaches, even the disease, even the disability. God can use that to make a difference. Tragedies like illnesses and accidents, they give God the opportunity to reveal himself in unique ways. God doesn't just strike us down so that he can turn around and raise us back up to show off. Okay? But again, God can use those situations in amazing ways. And here's the thing. We can't choose how God's going to glorify himself in us. But we can seek to glorify him no matter what our situation is. We can choose how we respond in the midst of it. You've seen it as well as I have. Someone going through a really difficult time, and it just grinds the life right out of them. And someone going through this same exact difficult time, and they are a beacon of God's love and light to those around them. We get to choose how we respond in the midst of those situations. All right, let's jump down a couple of verses to verses 6 and 7. So this is Jesus' response then. It says, "Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, 'Go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam.'" Siloam means sent. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. Now, I would think that if you put spit and mud in someone's eye, you'd be more likely to make a seeing man blind than make a blind man see. But I think that by using just these kind of common elements, everyone who saw what happened would know that the source of the healing was not so much what was used, but that Jesus was the healer. I mean, if he had pulled out some magic glowing rock and placed it on the man's eyes, Jesus would have healed him with his power, but everyone would have gone, "Oh man, that rock is awesome." I don't think there were too many people that said, "Hey, Jesus, spit on me too." I mean, I don't think that it was all about the spit in the mud. Now, scholars have debated for centuries what the significance of the saliva and the mud were. Jesus could have completely healed this man with a word. He'd done it before. We read about it. I think that maybe it's just that Jesus approaches each person in a different way. Some he heals with a word. Some he heals with a touch. Some have prayer beforehand. Some don't. Some are healed from a distance. Some are healed very close. Some are healed in private. Some are healed in public. Some of them are seeking out Jesus. Some of them are being sought out by Jesus. So what we have here is another instance of a very unique and personal encounter with Jesus Christ. And so the man did what Jesus instructed, and he was able to see. So the locals then, who were used to seeing this man blind on the side of the road begging, they were astonished that he could obviously now see, and they asked him how it happened, and he told them this man called Jesus. I mean, he didn't really know who he was, didn't recognize him because he hadn't seen him ever before, and he talked about how he had cured him. Now, according to Jewish law, whenever someone was healed of a disease, they had to have that cure certified by the local religious authorities before they could come back into community fully. They had to have it authenticated by the religious authorities. So the neighbors took the man to the Pharisees so that they could examine him. And this immediately left the Pharisees with a little bit of a problem. Because how could they certify this man as being cured and continue to reject the one that cured him? Because Jesus did it, and it was obviously Jesus, and the guy said it was Jesus. But hey, wait, he's the guy we're trying to get rid of. This is just going to make him look better. So the man then was brought in front of the Pharisees and asked the man to tell him what happened. And he told them, and they wanted to get the man's take on who it was that healed him. And so in verse 17, it says, "Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, 'What's your opinion about this man who healed you?' The man replied, 'I think he must be a prophet.' And their assessment was similar then to what we saw a couple of weeks ago. The Pharisees totally discounted the miraculous healing that they saw, and because it was done on the Sabbath. Okay, no one was allowed to work on the Sabbath, and so healing was work, and so no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't make this man who had been blind his whole life wait 12 more hours till the next day, and then finally. No, they were more focused on how it was done than the incredible miracle of what had happened. So then the Pharisees go after the man's parents. But the parents are scared of the authority of the Pharisees because they know that if the Pharisees don't like their answers, that they can kick them out of the synagogue. They can cast them out. They can cut them off from community. So the parents go, hey man, Junior's old enough to talk for himself, so we're not going to say anything. Go talk to him again. And so the Pharisees then track down the man who was healed again, and they start questioning him again. And they try to get this man to call Jesus a sinner. So you notice kind of a progression in here. Initially, he said, well, it's a man called Jesus. And then he said, well, he's a prophet. Okay? And then this is what he says in verse 25. He says, I don't know whether he's a sinner, the man replied, but I know this. I was blind, and now I can see. And I love this response. The man didn't know who Jesus really was. He didn't have all the answers. He hadn't been following him for years. He had not studied the scriptures. He didn't have an advanced degree. He wasn't in ministry. All that he knew was that he was blind, but now he sees. Don't feel like you have to get into a particular situation before asking Jesus for healing. Sometimes we feel like we have to get our life together first. Oh, I got to wait and fix these things about me, and then I'll start going to church. Then I'll start following Jesus. Then I'll start serving. Because we feel too broken. We feel too dirty. We feel like we've gone too far. We overcomplicate things. Sometimes it's as simple as, I was blind, but now I see. I was addicted, but now I'm free. I was lost, but now I'm found. I was broken, but now I'm whole. Simple as that. And this is a great example of how to share your faith with people around you in your life. Lots of folks are afraid to say anything about God in the context of their family or at work or in their neighborhood, their friendships, whatever the case may be, because they're afraid maybe they'll get dragged into some kind of theological argument that they're not going to know the answers for. That it's going to be over their heads. But being a witness is doing just what this man who was blind did. Telling what God's done for you. Because you are the world's greatest authority on what has happened in your life. Okay, people can argue the Bible all day long, but they can't argue what's happened with you. You were there. All right? So the Pharisees continue their inquisition of the man. And finally, the man responds back. I love this. In verse 27, he says, look, the man exclaimed, I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? so these guys who were harassing Jesus, he was like, what, you want to follow him? Yeah, come on, we can all follow him together. No, they didn't want that. Now, one of the things that we've said throughout this series is that John included these miracles in his gospel to help us to know that Jesus is the Messiah. So how does healing a blind man help us know that Jesus is the Messiah? Well, the Jews had been looking for the Messiah for generations. They looked to lots of prophecies in the Old Testament that foretold the coming of the Messiah. Scriptures like Isaiah 35:5 that says, and when he comes, he will open the eyes of the blind and unplug the ears of the deaf. In Isaiah 42, verses 6 and 7, I, the Lord, have called you to demonstrate my righteousness. I will take you by the hand and guard you. I will give you to my people Israel as a symbol of my covenant with them. And you will be a light to guide the nations. You will open the eyes of the blind. You will free the captives from prison, releasing those who sit in dark dungeons. So when John the Baptist, so John the Baptist is different from John who wrote the Gospel of John. We run into that at home all the time. I go, hey, I talked to John today, and she's like, John Peterson, John Delaney, which John? So you got John the Revelator, and John the Baptist. And so I'm talking about John the Baptist now. He sent messengers to Jesus to ask if he was truly the Messiah. And what did Jesus say? In Luke 7:22, it says, then he told John's disciples, go back to John and tell him what you've seen and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, those with leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. Jesus didn't say, hey, just go tell him I'm the Messiah. Instead, he said, hey, go tell John what I'm doing. Tell him what you've seen. Tell about how I'm healing like the Messiah is supposed to heal. And tell him I'm preaching the good news like the Messiah is supposed to preach. My actions are speaking louder than my words. And those actions line up with prophecies that had been there for generations and generations and generations. Another example of Jesus proving to everyone that he He was who he said he was. Now, while it was, of course, a big statement that Jesus was the Messiah, you got to think that this whole event, it had a really big effect on the man who was blind, right? I mean, it changed the trajectory of his whole life, that one encounter. I'm sure that when the blind man got up that morning, he had no idea that that day would be any different from every other day he'd experienced. Just the blackness of blindness, not being able to see. He didn't realize that that day there was a man named Jesus who was going to come and shatter that darkness forever. Maybe the question for you today is, are you ready to have Jesus bring you out of the darkness of your life? With whatever it is that's going on, whatever it is you're facing, the hurts, the habits, the hang-ups. Maybe this is stuff you've been trying to do it on your own, and it just doesn't work. It may work for a little while, but it's just not sustainable. We weren't created to pull ourselves out of the ditch. I know as Americans, we think that's what we're going to do, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We can do it. That's not how we were created. God created us to be dependent on him. And so maybe today is the day you just need to breathe deeply and be humble. Say, God, I can't do it anymore. This load is too heavy. The pain is too great. I don't know which way to go. I want to give it to you. And the good news is that he's right there waiting to walk alongside you, to deliver you, to give you the strength, to make good out of whatever the bad is that's going on in your life. Now, it may not be healing, a physical healing exactly like we saw in the story we read today. But God can work in all sorts of ways. And we know, like Lonnie talked about earlier, that we know the end of the story. We know that the healing's coming. Maybe not in this time frame. But you know that he's got his hand on you. And he's ready to pour out his goodness. He is able to work whatever good he can out of whatever difficult situation we face if we just hand it to him. Let's pray together. God, thank you for today. Thank you for this time. Thank you for your love for us, that you want to meet us where we are in whatever darkness we find ourselves, whether it's the darkness of our sin or the darkness of some of the things that have happened to us or the difficulties that we walk through, that you are there, that you are the light of the world, and that you want to shine through us. So God, whatever it is that we're holding on to, that we need to let go of, and that we need to give to you, God, give us the courage and strength to do that. And maybe today the step that you need to take is that first step. To say, hey, I've been trying to do this on my whole life. I've been blind from birth. And I want to have my eyes open. I want to get a chance to follow Jesus. Well, today can be that day. And one of the ways that we do that here is just through a simple prayer, just to kind of mark the beginning of that relationship, that we get a chance to hear ourselves say the words. And so I invite you to repeat after me and pray, dear God, thank you for loving me. Thank you for sending Jesus to die for my sin. Please forgive me of all I've done wrong. Help me live for you all the days of my life. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that